Hi peeps, happy Thursday to you. Oh my gosh, I can't believe you've made it this far. If you've been working hard on your reading and listening, I'm so proud of you. Good job. Remember that technically you only have tomorrow is Friday, and then remember Memorial Day is Monday, so we don't have school that day. And then you only have 4 more days left. So keep working hard, keep pushing. It's almost summer, but not quite yet, so keep going. I hope that you enjoyed watching my 2 cousins, Emma and Grace, on Monday, and then Mr. and Mrs. Bailey on Tuesday. So you'll see my honey and I today for 2 chapters, and they're pretty short, but they're very intense. So, yeah, they're actually very intense. I just read them, so. Just a little recap before I read. It looks like, sorry, I'm just trying to get my screen here. It looks like that Mr. and Mrs. Bailey read chapter 25 and 26, and we learned that Anton and his bubby were hiding under a staircase. So they didn't really tell us where they were hiding until Mr. and Mrs. Bailey read that. So I thought that was kind of clever that they found a hiding spot under the staircase. Anton decided to let Bubby rest in the house, in the abandoned house, while he was on the lookout and gathered things for their journey. And then he would keep Bubby safe and rested. But then we also learned that Major Von Dusen was kind of like the laughingstock at his job when he found his boss and when he was talking with him, and his boss kind of just gave him an easier job and everyone was making fun of him. But then he got a little more angry and he had a plan up his sleeve and he wasn't going to tell anyone about it. And we're actually going to find out his plan, part of it today. So, all right, I'm going to read chapter 27 and then my honey is going to read chapter 28 today. So I hope you enjoy. Make sure you get your orange booklets out. I know that the pages do run out when you're writing your chapter titles, so make sure you can just use the back of it or use an empty sheet of paper, and you can just write your chapter titles on there. So totally fine. All right, here we go, chapter 27. When Bubby finally woke up, the sky was dark. Anton's look at the house had revealed almost nothing of any use. He'd found a small container of salt, 2 empty jars he had filled with water from the pump, and a butter knife. They would take all of it, along with the quilt. They dined on raw potatoes and water. Bubby looked better after resting, but Anton knew she would still need to move slowly as they tried to find the others. Traveling at night would show them even more. Bubby, where is this priest grotto? Where are we to meet Uncle Dimitri? Anton asked. Remember, the priest grotto is that final destination that they wanted to meet his uncle at. Bubby said it is nearly 5 kilometers north of where we were with that cave. We have a long walk ahead of us. We may not make it before morning. If that is the case, we will have to find another place to hide. Anton considered this while he chewed. He hoped they could reunite with the remaining members of their group, but he was worried about locating the rendezvous point. If he and Bubby lost their way, they would need to follow the river, and that was how the Gestapo had discovered them in the first place. He hoped it would not come to that. Anton, there's something we need to talk about, Bubby said. Okay, what is it? It is about what happened in the field with the Gestapo. What you did to rescue me? You must not do such a thing again. What? Bubby? She held up her hand. When Bubby was serious, a look came over her face that Anton recognized. It was stern, but not angry. It meant he was to obey her every word. He had seen it many times. I am grateful that you saved my life, Anton. I know that you love me, and you were very brave, but you must never do such a thing again. You could have... Her voice broke off as her eyes filled with tears. You could have been killed. You are so much like your father, smart, dutiful, courageous. You remind me of him more and more each day. But I cannot lose you too. But Bubby, you have not lost Papa. He's just in the west, fighting with the Polish army. We do not know his fate. He could return to us when the war is done. True, but war is chaos. We do not know if he is alive or dead. The militias have stolen Pavel from me. Remember, that's her son and that's Anton's uncle. Soon, they or the Russian army will come to claim Dmitri for their ranks. And if this war lasts long enough, it will take you too. When you are older, when you are a man, you will decide if you will fight, you and you alone. But for now, you must stay alive. And if I am captured again, you will not take foolish chances. Your priority is your life and safety, not mine. I need you to swear that to me. Anton wanted to protest, but he knew Bubby would insist. They could argue for hours, and her position would not change. He would do his best to stay alive and prevent her from being captured again, and he would give her the words she wanted. He just did not know whether he could stand by them. I swear, Bubby, he said, I will not take such a foolish chance again. Bubby patted him on the hand. You are a good boy, Anton. Your mother and your father will be so proud. She stood up and stretched. We should get moving. We have far to go, and we do not know when another Gestapo patrol might pass by without warning. We will be safer once we reach the forest. Anton was not sure he agreed, but he gathered up their supplies. He packed the water jars carefully in the blanket pack. He hooked it over his shoulder. Then he and Bubby ventured into the darkness. The only way they could find the priest's grotto was to backtrack until they recognized a landmark well enough to know which direction they should head next. Soon, the farmhouse was behind them. They crossed the rough terrain of the field and eventually were enveloped in the hardwood forest. With very little light, it was slow going. They had to navigate the forest floor while watching out for tree roots and low-hanging branches. And imagine doing that, peeps, when it's really, really dark out. After about an hour, they stopped to rest. Bubby was breathing very hard, so Anton gave her a sip of water. But they could not dilly-dally for long. Bubby insisted that they plow ahead. A bit farther on, they came to the river, and Anton finally recognized where they were. In fact, they were close to their original hiding place. He'd known they needed to find a familiar place to orient themselves, but walking along the river was exactly the thing he had been hoping to avoid. Anton stopped and listened. What is it? Bubby whispered. This is the river where Uncle Dmitri and the other men gathered our water when we were living in the cave. I believe the Gestapo used it to track us when we were in the cave. So, you think they may have planted men nearby to catch us returning to our hiding spot? Yes, Bubby, he said. To be safe, we should cross to the other side of the river. We must travel as quietly as possible. If they were smart, they would hide on this side of the river closest to the cave entrance. But in truth, it is impossible to know what is in their heads. But crossing the river is not safe, Bubby said. It will be if we have to find the right spot, Anton replied. Lend me your walking stick. Anton took the offered staff and found a flat spot on the bank. He poked ahead of him with the walking stick, feeling along the bottom of the river. Soon he stood in the water up to his knees. The bottom of the river was rocky, not muddy, which would make it easier to cross. He kept creeping forward until the water reached his waist. But with a few more steps, he had crossed to the other side. He retraced his steps and took Bubby by the arm. As they entered the water, she winced at how cold it was, but Anton held her tightly, using the staff to keep them upright. The current was not strong, and they slowly worked their way to the other side. Anton removed his coat and shirt and wrung them out. Bubby bunched up her skirt, twisting in her hands to do the same. We must be quiet, Bubby, he said. If the Gestapo is here, they will be watching the river. We will go around to the west and then circle back. Before he could say another word, someone grabbed him from behind, and a hand closed over his mouth. Unfortunately, that's the end of my chapter, peeps. This book is just famous for their cliffhangers. So, I want you to pause my video and think of a chapter title. Remember, I did say this in my last video from last week. A lot of the times, peeps, my question on Google Classroom is not always about your chapter title. So I still want you to write your chapter title for every single chapter, but sometimes I don't want to know your chapter title. But you still always have to write one. So right now, if it helps you, pause my video and think of a chapter title for chapter 27. And then we're going to hear chapter 28.
Chapter 28. Sergeant Weigert, who drove the truck, was an unrelenting talker. Despite Von Deusen's gruff one-word answers, Weigert droned on and on. Even when Carl did not answer him at all, he was not deterred. Within a few kilometers, Carl swore he knew the man's entire life history. How Weigert was born in Dresden, but grew up in Dusseldorf. His father was an engineer, and his mother had died when he was 16. He dropped out of college to join the army, and on and on and on.
So right now, peeps, this person that we're talking about, Major Von Dusen, when he's in the car with all those Jews, that's the driver. So the driver right now is kind of boring him because he can't stop talking. So that's the sergeant he's talking about.
Von Dusen had no interest in any of his yammering. He was looking for the right spot to implement his plan. So far, nothing had proved suitable, but he knew the territory well from rounding up Uden. Soon they would arrive at a place that would work perfectly. This truck would be better used for hunting than transporting, he thought to himself. Though he appeared calm and collected on the outside, inside he still seethed at the treatment he'd received from General Steuben. Yes, he had lost the prisoners. His men had gunned down the woman and child, but it was a single unfortunate mistake. He and his squad had captured more Jews than any other in the entire regiment. He was a genius at sniffing out their hiding places and imprisoning them. But all that had been undone by a single error. On they drove, the sergeant yammering away. Von Dusen was not sure whether Weigert even realized that his passenger had stopped participating in the conversation. Carl occupied himself by looking out the window at the passing countryside, waiting for the right spot to appear. Finally, after several more kilometers, he saw it. The road bisected two large wheat fields and was lined by irrigation ditches on either side. There were no houses or villages around for kilometers. Halten, he ordered. Mein Major? Halten, Sie, Von Dusen repeated. Mein Major, our orders. I was given new orders before we left, he said. He pulled several sheets of folded paper from inside the coat pocket of his uniform. In reality, they were not official documents of any kind. But the sergeant did not know that. Ja, mein Major, he said. With a shrug, he applied the brakes, and the large truck came to a lumbering stop in the middle of the road. Now what, mein Major? Go to the rear of the truck, open the tailgate, and order the Uden out. Have them line up in front of the ditch. Major? Weigert was clearly confused by his request. Do it! Schnell! Schnell! Sensing something in his superior's voice, Weigert hurriedly opened the door and scrambled out. A few seconds later, Von Dusen heard the sergeant bark an order in Ukrainian. Even though it was a large truck, he felt it bounce as the Jews climbed out. He took a deep breath. Now was the time. Sergeant Weigert's machine gun lay on the seat next to him. He grabbed it along with 2 extra clips of ammunition and exited the vehicle. In the darkness, he could see the silhouettes of the prisoners milling about in the middle of the road. Weigert was trying to herd them in front of the irrigation canal, but they ignored him. All of you, line up in front of the ditch, Von Dusen commanded in his loudest, most serious tone. He did not speak Ukrainian and had to repeat himself twice, but eventually they quietly did as he ordered. These Jews had no fight left in them. For months they had been hunted, beaten, tortured, starved, and imprisoned. Now they were resigned to their fates. Von Dusen stalked to the middle of the line. Turn and face the field, he shouted. What could they do but comply? A few of the prisoners began to pray. When all of them had turned, Von Dusen racked the slide on the machine gun and pulled the trigger. The gun jumped in his hands as bullets leapt from the barrel. The noise was deafening. Lead ripped into the bodies before him. The children went down first, tumbling into the ditch. A few of the younger women tried to run, but they did not get far. When one of the old men tried to turn as if to fight, the bullets knocked him backward, and he fell screaming into the trench. Von Dusen walked to the edge and peered in at the bodies. A few of them still moved. He inserted a flesh clip into the gun and fired at the bodies again. When the clip emptied and the bullets were gone and the night was silent again, finally, it was done. He had not relished the task, but he needed the truck to find that old woman and save his career. This was the only way. He turned to find Sergeant Weigert staring at him in disbelief. Mein Gott, Herr Major, he said. Was haben Sie getan? What have you done? Von Dusen looked directly into the sergeant's eyes. He wanted to make sure the man understood him. I have done, Sergeant. what needed to be done. He turned toward the truck. Come, he said. We have a long drive ahead of us.
Okay, wow, that was really heavy. That should remind you kind of our social studies lessons with those pictures I showed you. We talked about Hitler's point of view and what he wanted to accomplish. But wow, so he now is using that empty truck with that sergeant, and they're gonna go find Bubby, and they're gonna go find Anton. So, oof, we're taking a break. Thank goodness. Okay, so make sure you go to Google Classroom. Make sure you read the question. Remember, I don't always ask for chapter titles, so make sure you read it carefully because I might ask you a different question. Have a great Thursday, and make sure you tune in tomorrow for Debate Friday with Miss Mandy. Bye.